I want to do a quick video of getting the engine in the car. Normally it would just be a quick bolt up, but I realized something that once I bolted the engine in the car and got it all aligned, and especially once I do the subframe connectors, the subframe is welded to the car. It's not coming out. So there are a number of places where I'm going to want to put nut certs or rivnuts, depending on where you're from, that would be blocked by the engine, and I don't want to have to pull the engine out just to put places for that. So I'm trying to lay out the wiring harness now. Here it is. It's from Holley, comes with the Terminator X unit. I have to say it's pretty high quality. However, in some instances, for some of the line runs, they give you way too much line. I know they're trying to make it long enough that it can kind of meet a bunch of different, cars and trucks and combinations, but some of it's a little excessive. And then on the other hand, some of the lines are really short. Like this silver line down here is for the odd bank knock sensor. There's another one on the even side, and it's just very short because you have another one just like it. And if you plug them both in, the split where they come out of in the wiring harness has to be right down on top of the bell housing. So that is just not sufficient. So I would have been okay if everything was long, but there are a couple of pieces that aren't long enough. And here's what I'm talking about on this other side. This wire right here goes to the other knock sensor. This is the cam sensor. Another place where I hurt myself because I'm using the 24X cam sensor, but this Terminator system is for the 58X, so I'm gonna have to change this plug on there at some point. But because this line and the other line on the other side are so short, this trunk of the wire has to sit right there, which is gonna be a little awkward to get to. So, nice quality. They could have probably thought it out a little bit better. But what I really needed to do before I bolted the engine on was put this panel on there. This is the block off panel. It's gonna go kind of like right there, and it'll be bolted on, and then the forced fuel header tank will be attached to it, and I'll talk about that later. But what I've done is I've drawn a little chalk outline of where it goes, along with little holes that I've kind of punched, and I'm gonna put all that on. I'm only gonna put the hardware on for the block off panel, but I'm also gonna put hard points for the adel clamps, which I'm gonna use on the wiring harness, on with what I alluded to in earlier videos is one of my favorite tools, which is this Rivnut tool or nut cert tool. This one's an Astro 1442. And basically what happens is it has these little barrel nuts, or these little, they're a cross between a nut and a rivet. And you drill a hole that's the size of this piece, you push it in there, and then you use the tool to kind of pop rivet it almost in place. It's more of a squeeze in this case instead of a pop, but what you end up with is a nice threaded hole, as opposed to having to get to the back side of something. It's not the strongest thing. You wouldn't want to use it for a structural mounting point, but for mounting wiring harnesses and mounting that block off plate and things, this is awesome. It also makes it look a lot cleaner than just popping a hole with a sheet metal screw or using a zip tie. And here's the firewall with the holes drilled. So you can see there's holes around the outside of where that panel is going to be, and I've got a hole here, here, and here, one there, a couple more over here, and you can't really tell very well, but I've used these little factory mounting tabs. They already had 3/8 inch holes, which is the right size for the rivnuts, but I added a second one on this side so I can actually run 4 adel clamps, 2 on each bolt if I wanted to. So this is where my fuel supply and return line will be, as well as some of the wires that go to the transmission. So yeah, it was a little bit of a heartbreaker since I spent so much time filling all the holes on the firewall to put new holes back in, but I guess that's just the way it goes. So now I just need to grab my rivnut tool or my nut cert tool and start putting rivnuts like that. So I'll show an example of one of those in just a second. All right, here's a little closer up view of one of the rivnuts. Well, you can see inside it's threaded. This piece right here underneath the smooth shank part is threaded. This part is not, and there's a little shoulder. And so you see these little splines almost. when you stick it in and you use the squeezer to pull this, it's going to mushroom this section out, and this will be on one side of your sheet metal, and then this little mushroom section will be on the other side, and these little splines kind of splay out and they act almost like a star washer and grab it and keep it from twisting when you put any torque on it. And so the way it's going to go in, I've got a hole here. This is a 1/4 20 Rivnut. Fits in a 3/8 hole. It just drops right in, and that's how it looks. And now I get the squeezer and show you what it looks like. All right, here it is on the squeezer. This isn't the one I showed. This is a Marzen. The 1442 I actually like a little better. But one thing you can do is if you try to over squeeze it, you can snap the mandrel off, which ask me how I know. So I'm using a friend's squeezer while I'm waiting for a new mandrel to come in. So again, it's not a pop rivet, so if you hear it pop, you broke something, just like I did. So basically we've got the Rivnut threaded down on the little mandrel. That's the piece that I snapped on my piece because I squeezed it too hard. You just thread it in, stick it through the hole. Let's see if I can get this on camera. Basically hold it flush and then you squeeze. You basically squeeze it. There we go. You see it starting to mushroom where the splines are. There we go. Now that it's stuck in there, give it an extra little squeeze and see what happened. The barrel kind of mushroomed out and these splines are now kind of grabbing the metal. And so when you want to remove it, you basically just release it. You back this out. Take it off just like you would a screw. Now you've got this nice little hard point 1/4 20 in the metal, and you didn't even need to get to the back of this, so you can use it for blind applications. Super fancy. I played around with the settings on the squeezer a little bit more, and you might be able to tell I was able to get it to mushroom a good bit more. Now you can almost not see any of the original splines because they've been fully squeezed. And it just required some fiddling with the little squeezer to get it straight. So now that I've got that one all squeezed in there, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I was curious, I was wondering how much torque you can put on this, because it's just this kind of squeezed spline setup that is holding it in place, and so if you really crank down on it, it's just going to spin. So now that I've got it squeezed, it seems pretty well. I've got this bolt in there, this 1/4 20 bolt in there, and I've got it marked. So I'm going to take my little small 1/4 inch drive torque wrench, and I'm going to start turning up the level until it starts to spin, and I've got it marked so I can tell that if it's spun or not. All right, I inched up in 5 inch-pound increments, and this one started to spin at 120 inch-pounds, which is convenient because that's simple math, which means it's about 10 foot-pounds. So not significant. Again, like I mentioned before, not really should be used for structural applications, but for mounting wire clamps and things like that, should be fine. I'm sure that value changes significantly depending on the material you put it through and how tightly you squeeze it and all sorts of things. So don't use it as a set reference. But 120 inch-pounds, 10 foot-pounds is about where this 1/4 20 Rivnut started to spin. All right, got them all in there. There's a few over there. There's a couple on that face down there. Here are the ones that I said I had done on these 2 tabs. I basically used a little hand mirror, a little mechanic's mirror, and got behind every one I could just to verify that I squeezed them. And I think I've got them all good to go. So now that those are in, I can go ahead and finally bolt the engine in the car. Cross fingers. All right, the engine's all bolted in. So you can see I got the fill plate bolted in there as well. Engine's all lined up. This is what it looks like from the other side. One thing I noted is when I was lifting up on the lift, the lift is holding it back here, and I've got my jack stands right up here. So when I lifted it up and took the weight off the jack stands, you could see the car was kind of like, it looked like this, and as soon as I lifted it up, the whole front subframe kind of flexed. And it's not because this is flexible, but it's because where the body is mounted to it is flexible. So not only does this justify my decision to later on go in and put subframe connectors on the inside, but it also means that I probably will have to go ahead and do what I was talking about earlier, is come off these pickup points or something like that, and then bring a tube down. And this subframe actually has some pretty beefy mount points right here, so I can bring a piece off here and up and come straight back to triangulate this. So it was just very visible that there's flexibility in the body. So we'll address it.
I'm going to try to get a video of it flexing, so keep reference of the body, which is this black cowl piece on the right and the green door, and then with respect to the engine while I lift the lift up. And I'm going to set it back down.
All right, I've got it up on the lift. I'll just go quickly over how I attempted to align this thing. It's kind of a folly to try to align it perfectly because the body's not straight, because none of these were. So basically I need to get the front suspension aligned with the rear suspension. Since I don't have the new rear suspension on there yet, that's next up. What I did was I measured from the back of this subframe member to some point, which I'm going to use as my key reference. And what I decided to use was this hole right here, which is a hole stamped in the leading edge of the rear frame rails, which are a part of the unibody. There's one on this side, and there's one on this side. So, you know, it's as good a point as any. So what I did is I measured from this hole forward, and I equalized it with the measure from this hole forward. And then I also measured from, just to double check, from this hole all the way up to the grease nipple on the bottom of the ball joint. Because realistically, what you really want is the wheels aligned, not necessarily the frame. So I went from here all the way back to that hole, as well as from the back of this to the hole, both sides. And then I went from that hole on this side diagonally across to the grease nipple over here, and did the same on this side from that hole over there across to the grease nipple here, and equalized those values. So I'm within a 1/16 of an inch right now, which is probably more accurate than the factory stamped those holes. So that'll be close enough, and then I'll do the final alignment with the rear suspension.